Mounce, BBG, chapter 17, sentence 10, last sentence of the chapter. All right. You do behold, of course. That's going to be your first word. That's obvious. And then you got your subject with hoi mate toi, and hopefully you recognize this is the possessive. So, behold your disciples, and again, nominative plural. So you're going to look at the definite article here, because this you might be thrown by this because it's an unusual noun with mathetes. But as soon as you see the definite article, you know that it's nominative plural, and you know that it's the subject. So behold your disciples, and then here hopefully you recognize. Whoops! I'm going to try to do this better. Hopefully, all right. I'm getting frustrated now. There you go. Hopefully you recognize usi with the movable nu as the third person plural for the verb. And hopefully by now you're seeing that circumflex and saying, okay, the circumflex is probably telling me it's a contract noun or contract verb, because that's the only use I know for the circumflex at this point. And you'd be correct, because then you would say, well, what verb is it? You'd say poieo, and then you would hear yourself say, well, that's a contract verb. So hopefully that all makes sense. And then you say, well, that means it's they do. Well, they is going to line up with a plural noun, and he just said your disciples, so that lines up in terms of subject-verb agreement. So behold your disciples do, and then you have this relative pronoun, and we'll come back to it, of course, but let's go on and do the rest of the sentence, and then we'll come back to the relative pronoun. You have Mounce giving you ex estin as it is lawful, but you remember that most of the time he's not going to give you the negation in there, and you got to be able to spot that every time. So behold your disciples do what is not lawful, okay, because you have ook. So your disciples do what is not lawful, and then he gives you the infinitive to do, and then on the Sabbath, you see in, and you always think in, but again, in that case, it's a collocation rule. It's you're doing it in the sphere of that day. So they would use the preposition en, and where we would say something like on the Sabbath. So feel free, obviously, to translate it as on. In this case, behold your disciples do what it is not lawful to do on the Sabbath. So that's an easy enough sentence, hopefully. The tricky one there, well, of course, you got a couple things. Again, on a chapter on contract verbs, you always want to be able to spot that circumflex, know the verb, and know that that's a contract verb. So that just tells you it's typical present active indicative, and that circumflex is telling you that it contracted. But other than that, it looks like it should. Looks like everything else. Okay, so that being said, we go back to this relative pronoun, and we say ho, and we say, okay, well, that's neuter, singular, and is it, if it's neuter, then is it nominative or accusative? Well, neuter singular is going to be what it goes back to. Well, your disciples do, there's nothing in there that it refers to, right? So again, what you find is with relative pronouns, if they just refer to something, there's this neuter something, where in English we would say something. A lot of times it's just unstated. They're doing something. Whatever it is, it's just they're doing something, and it's unnamed, but it's something, so therefore it's neuter. And that's what you have happening here, is that your disciples do. Well, what is it that they do? Well, they do something. They do what is not lawful to do, but the bottom line is that they're doing something. So the antecedent is the something that is unnamed. And then, you say, well, okay, that fits with it being neuter and singular. But in terms of case, is it nominative or accusative? Well, it is not lawful to do. Well, could it be it? Well, it was talking about what they're doing, though, and again, it's the object of what they're doing as far as the antecedent. So then you have this next clause where it says it's not lawful to do what? It's not lawful to do something. And again, in terms of what it would replace in the relative clause is the something that we were talking about them doing in the first clause. So again, it makes very good sense for it to follow that infinitive poiein, because it's what it's not lawful to do. Well, what is it not lawful to do? Something that's something that they're doing. It's not lawful for them to do that something. So again, that tells you that in this particular case, that ho is going to be accusative because it's going to be replacing that direct object in terms of what it's not lawful to do. That's something that it's not lawful to do. So hopefully that makes sense to everybody. This is an odd one, and it's certainly not one I would give you on an exam in any case, but still helpful to think about those things and to think about how those relative pronouns work and why. And again, number and gender left, case goes to the antecedent, and case goes to the right to how it's used in the relative clause. Okay.